Welcome to Missing Artwork, a show that lets artists behind your favorite album art tell their story and experience in making the iconic image of the music you love. I'm your host, Michael Escanuelas, and today we're talking to Mark O'Brien, the designer behind the artwork for Valuables, the latest and final album by the Wicklow, Ireland band Enemies. A lasting impression is important. But when the four members that compose the post-rock outfit Enemies first set out to make their third full-length record titled Valuables, the band did not realize that this album would be the members' final statement. Upon arriving back from a US tour, the members disbanded with the LP left unfinished, only to regroup later to complete the album they set out to make. This presented a challenging task for O'Brien, who was pulling double duty as a musician and designer for the band. His creation for the artwork of Valuables is a clear representation of the chaos that surrounded the making of this album. Random strokes of paint in various colors such as pink, blue, and yellow consume the cover. The colors reveal a detail of texture, exposing every vulnerable stroke from the brush. The image is consumed with chaos, but within the vision lies a small white box revealing the band name and album title.
My name is Mark O'Brien, and I am a musician and graphic designer from Dublin in Ireland. I've been playing within the band Enemies for the last nearly 10 years now, since 2007, and all throughout our existence as a band I've been creating our visual material, so single covers, album covers, t-shirts, a little bit of input into video work. Really playing music and graphic design, they were always kind of synonymous with each other because there was always gig posters to be designed, crappy little CDRs and stuff to be like packaged and distributed. Yeah, I think for the last, ever since I was about 14 or so, I've just been kind of juggling the two in a nice synergy. I met the guys from Enemies when I was playing in punk bands and involved in a cool DIY scene when I was a teenager. I mean, we're all kind of self-taught to some extent. I eventually went on to university to study graphic design, but in the early days it was all very much just like teaching ourselves to design. Owen from Enemies is a self-taught kind of recording engineer. Lewis is kind of Lewis dropped out of school before he even did his, when he was in his final year of high school, and went on then to be a music publicist, which is kind of all self-taught as well. So we've got all these weird little skills within the band that are just kind of the result of necessity, maybe.
With O'Brien's role in the band as both a designer and musician, the story of Valuables' artwork begins with the music itself.
We've been playing in Enemies for the guts of 10 years now, and Valuables has taken about 2 years to piece together, and it was going to be, I guess the idea behind the album was that it would be the album to kind of make or break the band. I mean, the visual aspect of it was it was very much put on the back burner until the record was completed, because I think it would be doing the record a disservice to try and think of that in tandem with the recording process. You don't really know what the final outcome is going to sound like and what the kind of thematic link between the tracks is going to be and what the kind of overall narrative of it is going to be. So I think it's better to kind of focus on the music part first, and then when you have a picture in front of you, a sonic picture in front of you, then you have the headspace to think, okay, well, how is this best represented visually? I think when we got over the halfway point in terms of writing material, we started to kind of realize that we actually had something that was pretty special here. We were all working our own respective jobs outside of the band, and we kind of came together and said, let's just focus on this. Once we're nearly finished this record, let's essentially quit our jobs and really go for it on this album. We've been tapping away at this for 9 years now. Let's really give this the time and attention and the craft that it deserves. I guess there's a lot of pressure that comes with that when when you quit your job and decide to kind of go out on this life as a full-time musician that doesn't really have any money coming in the near future. Then the band went on a big long US tour about halfway through the recording and proceeded to completely fall apart. and I mean, like, not that the touring tore the band apart, but just that there was a lot of kind of cracks maybe that were being pasted over for a long time that became very apparent while on tour. So when we came back then and the band had pretty much fallen apart, it completely changed the context of this album. There was a couple of weeks where this album was just, there was no question about it. Like, this wasn't being finished. Enemies was done, and it was time for us to just get over it and move on and do other things with our lives. So that was great. I didn't have to worry about the artwork or finishing the album or anything like that. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. It was actually a very tough time, for all of us. When we eventually kind of had some time to think on it and to come back to it, then we kind of realized that this album, if you'll excuse the pun, but it was very valuable to us, and we wanted to finish it, and we felt like we'd be doing the band a disservice to simply just not release it and to just let it fade away into some hard drive somewhere, never to be seen again. We came back and we finished the record, and we managed to kind of get our friendships back on track and create something that was really, really nourishing. And all the studio time after that point was just lovely. Like, we couldn't have imagined it when we came off that tour that we would ever get back in the studio and make something so lovely.
Much like the recording process of Valuables, the concept of the artwork went through many changes and shifts in direction.
Initially, I said, me doing the artwork on this is a really bad idea. I'm too close to it. I've had too much of an emotional ups and downs throughout the writing and recording of this. Let's get someone with an outside perspective to come in and do this. Sure enough, then deadlines start to kind of rear their ugly head, and you're kind of looking out. You're looking to other people and talking to a couple of friends who you think might be suitable. Subconsciously, there was always a part of me that knew it was going to be me creating it, for the fact that we've been making music together for 10 years, and I've always created all of our visual aspects of the band, so it wouldn't really be right to have our final gift to the world packaged by someone else. I got drawn towards minimalism, and I started to look at things like the White Album by the Beatles, which was just such a wonderful game changer of an album cover, because it was basically nothing. And I feel like they're a band, I feel like it's appropriate for a band like the Beatles as well, because there's so much. It's four very different musicians with such opposing kind of personalities, and it's no secret that these guys fucking killed each other in the studio. So I was thinking, okay, maybe it is best to just kind of have like a clean slate, something that is just like almost purifying in its sense of being just minimal, understated, and then it might have some sort of emotional resonance with the fact that this is the last album of the band. There's not really anything more to say. Everything that needs to be said has been said, so let's just go, rather than having an image or an icon, I just want to go purely minimal on this. So I put together a mood board of white pieces of paper. I brought that to the band, and they kind of looked over this Pinterest board of just like incredibly minimal stuff that I had put together, and they kind of said, well, there's nothing here, like this, what are we supposed to say about this? It was good that happened, because then the guys kind of went away and they said, okay, we think that we kind of get where your head is at here, but also Enemies has always had such a colourful, vibrant kind of upbeat, illustrative, visual history that this just doesn't feel like Enemies. It feels almost, it feels just a little bit too somber or too sad to represent the tone of this album and to represent the legacy of the band. So Lewis, who's, he's got a great eye for just like cool graphic design, he went off and he kind of put together a mood board which was much more colourful and psychedelic and vibrant than the white sheets of paper that I had put in front of the band. The visuals that he was putting together, a lot of really zany, weird, psychedelic stuff, and MC Escher-esque paintings, and a lot of like kind of Tame Impala references and stuff like that. The stuff that he was putting together was actually a lot more in tune with a lot of the kind of sounds on the album. Those references, I think, put me in a direction that was on a good path. Just to give something to compare it to, the last album had a motif on the cover that was inspired by a compass, and it was all themed around adventure, and the title of the album is called Embark Embrace, so it was all about kind of venturing off into the world and touring and really kind of going for it. This album is kind of the result of that not working. There was no real concept other than that. It was just to create something beautiful without really saying a lot.
It wasn't easy for O'Brien to capture the many moving parts of the creation of Valuables. For the album art to represent the band's hard work, O'Brien reached out to his peer.
My friend Louise, she's in a band called Come On Live Long, and she actually sings on one of the tracks on the record. she's just kind of a really multifaceted designer slash artist who can basically accomplish anything that she puts her head to. So I kind of showed her some references and I said, how do you kind of make this sort of stuff? She said to me, well, what would be really interesting is for you to create just go nuts and create these weird abstract paintings. Pick a couple of colors that you like and just kind of fuck around with them. Then she was like, I know this scanning facility in Dublin that you can basically go into, and it's like a 2000 DPI art scanner that will blow up any piece of work you do to like billboard size, and you can hone in on like a square inch section of a painting that you do, and it will blow it up to this amazingly vibrant thing that, you'll start to see textures and colors in it that you didn't even know were there. She just said the best advice I can give you is to work small. So I dug out like a crate of old acrylic paints that I hadn't touched since I was about 17 or 18 years old, and just immediately started just making a mess. And it was such a wonderful experience to just sit down with paints and paintbrushes, and I think I was using toothpaste and glitter and kitchen oil and weird stuff in the mix and just making weird shit. And then the result was this really vibrant, colourful mess, which is Valuables.
With a color palette so strong, O'Brien used his past experience with the band and his knowledge of theory to grab his audience.
I mixed up a couple of colors with the acrylic paints that the kind of colors maybe that have been used in our material throughout the past. I don't know, some deep blues and pinks, keeping in mind what you can and cannot achieve with like CMYK. Pink or magenta is a color that I've always been drawn to because it comes out really strong in print. It's one of the core inks that gets used in standard printing. So I just mixed up some pinks and some nice, deep blues and some like lime greens. It was just a case of like sitting down with it and bashing away at it and just kind of leaving a lot of it up to chance. So I came out of it with a couple of small paintings, and then there was one in particular that seemed quite strong, and I just brought it into the scanning facility. The image that makes up the album cover of Valuables is, in reality, that section that we cropped into is about 2 inches by 2 inches, in size. And when you look at it on the record sleeve, it looks like it could be like a huge Mark Rothko painting or something. So it's pretty fascinating.
Although minimal, the type treatment on Valuables makes a larger statement.
It just feels a little bit more, it feels like we've grown up a little bit more. And I think when you're younger and you're creating artwork for a band, you kind of try to throw everything in the kitchen sink in sometimes. And I think there's a maturity to just the restraint shown on this record. Even the way that the band name is presented on the sleeve, it's quite restrained. It's simple, straightforward typography in a simple little white box, bang in the center. So it's like the tombstone of Enemies. And I feel like when you overly ornament, you go to a graveyard and you see those overly ornamented tombstones with loads of like little angels and babies and weird stuff all over them. They just look really tacky and unnecessary. So this is like the classy tombstone in the cemetery of Enemies.
O'Brien had no shame in expressing his love for typography.
So this is the part where everyone turns off the podcast now, because we're just this is where we strictly talk about like the kerning of the letters. It's been nice talking to you guys. No, with the typographic approach and the positioning of the lettering and stuff, it's such a big, bold, colorful, textured piece that it is kind of difficult to fit text in there, because it comes down to like, okay, you can completely ruin the effect of the image by putting like large, big, blocky text over it and just distracting from it, or you can bury something small and apologetic within it, and a lot of people might just miss it, or it's just kind of hidden. So it was about finding a kind of a happy middle ground there. I to be honest, couldn't even tell you where the idea came from, but it just kind of worked. I think I'd done a couple of days of iterations of just either trying big blocky stuff or small apologetic bits and pieces buried within the painting itself, and then it just kind of like midnight, after a couple of hours of just pixel pushing, the white box happened, the Eureka white box moment. So that nice little serif, I think I used Miller text for any super nerds out there who want to know what the font is. This is the juicy stuff. Yeah, I used Miller text. I think it was set at like 400 letter spacing. And for the sans serif, I think I used a font called Grotesque MT for Enemies, and then I just kind of matched them up to make sure that the letter height was, they're setting a deep blue because there's a deep blue in the background. They've got a nice little thin pink stroke between them because there's pink in the background. Yeah, it's really very, very conceptual stuff.
Valuables was no easy task for the members of Enemies, but with the artwork, O'Brien was able to take all these elements to create a visual that makes a bold and simple final statement for the band.
I feel a great sense of pride for everything, the look of it, but most importantly, the fact that it exists. It was a really, really difficult album for us to make, and we each got put through the mill in terms of other life elements that kind of got in the way and, tried to derail this at every possible turn. I feel really proud that we've actually came back together and repaired what was broken within the band in terms of friendships and musical differences and differences of vision for the record, and met in this wonderful middle ground where we could just create this lovely final statement. Yeah, it really does feel like an album that is made for ourselves, and that's a lovely thing to be able to listen to from start to finish and just see truth and honesty in it. So yeah, it's lovely.
Missing Artwork is a collaboration of Chris Lantinen and myself, Michael Escanuelas. We are part of the Modern Vinyl family of podcasts, which represents other great shows like Misaligned and Vinyl Crawl. Check out modern-vinyl.com to see the latest vinyl news, features, and to find out more information about our podcast family. Thank you to Mark Redito for our theme music. And of course, thank you to Mark O'Brien for talking with us. We are still in our podcast infancy, so please go and subscribe to our show on iTunes or whatever podcast service you favor. And leave a review telling us how much you love us and the show. Then go share us with your friends. We're always on the hunt for new listeners. Thank you for listening.